Welcome to Assembly Calendar. I'm Mike Friesen, and with us for our program today, Assemblyman Bob Oakes. Bob Oakes represents the 128th Assembly District in New York State, an Assembly District that includes Wayne, Cayuga, and Oswego counties. We want to thank you folks all across the region for joining us for our program today. Bob Oakes, nice to see you.
Thank you, Mike.
You went to the last game at Archbold Stadium?
I did.
I think I was there too.
It was a sunny day.
It was very nice. A little cool. But
cool. Sitting on cement.
On the cement. I love that stadium. Absolutely love that stadium, and that it was just one big cement oval. And I was attending at the time. I was there when my freshman year, Archbold was the venue.
Syracuse University.
At Syracuse University, exactly. Well, where else is Archbold Stadium going to be? And then I watched them build
the dome,
the Carrier Dome, while I was there. It was kind of an exciting time. You know, you were kind of sidestepping the construction all that time, but exciting times.
Interesting.
We'll have to compare more notes on this Archbold Stadium thing that we just found out about before the music all started and the program began. We have Bob Oakes here today to talk with us about what's going on at the state capitol. It is the month of March. We've got budget talks going on here at the state capitol. Bob Oakes is a big part of that as the ranking member on the Assembly's Ways and Means Committee. You walked into the studios this morning to do this taping with a posse, if you will, a bunch of gentlemen that were here with you today from an organization called LEAD, and you and they were explaining to me that this is a group leadership program having to do with agriculture.
Absolutely. Of course, agriculture, the industry of agriculture is so critical to New York, so important for our region. And LEAD New York is a program that Cornell established a number of years ago, is to take people who want to perform better in their own existing business that they're in, maybe interconnect more with others who are in similar businesses, or perhaps move into some other part of the agriculture industry in New York. But certainly in our area, apples are kind of king. Wayne County alone, 20,000 acres of apples. And I have a couple of apple growers, one from Niagara County, Kevin Bittner, and also Adam Peters from Williamson, who are in their local family operations in the apple industry. And then Mike Verts, who is from my original hometown of Town of Rose in North Rose. And Mike is actually involved more on the property side, trying to work with businesses to strengthen them, maybe finding a building that one might use to expand their operation or for storage or issue. There's all kinds of things, and Mike's been a great friend for years. And so these three individuals, it's great spending some time with me, shadowing, looking at what I do. This is a part of a program. They're in a monthly program over 2 years. It's a huge commitment, really, of time. But again, if we're going to have a emerging agriculture industry responding to the changes, we need people who are leaders and thinkers, people who are connected to others, and that's what LEAD tries to do. So there's, I think, 30 from around the state in this program, in the class. 3 of them are with me today, and I really appreciate that.
I would guess the people of Wayne and Cayuga counties and Oswego County, too, would not be too surprised to hear this. But a lot of people look at New York State, and they would never think that agriculture is New York's #1 industry. I mean, #1.
Absolutely. And, you know, I talked a lot about apples, but, you know, onions, potatoes, and, of course, corn and soybeans
and dairy.
And dairy, obviously. Half of all the agriculture revenue comes from dairy in New York State. And it's a multi-billion-dollar business, and clearly very big to the 128th Assembly District, as you mentioned, in Cayuga and Oswego and Wayne counties, but throughout New York State. An
industry that is constantly changing, and probably never more so than in the last 20 years with technological developments, computers on the farms. It's been an amazing thing to watch, and I would tend to bet, Assemblyman, that these folks that are with you today that have an opportunity to have your ear a little bit, maybe talking to you about the relationship between the state of New York and agriculture. Some complain, some make the case that maybe New York isn't as responsive to the agricultural community as it ought to be, especially when you take into account agriculture is #1 in this state.
Well, that's definitely the case, but you just threw a lot of things out there.
That's what I do.
And I know the whole show isn't going to be on agriculture today, but clearly, when you talk about things changing, apples, it used to be you could keep them for just a little while, and maybe make them into something, applesauce or something that you can store on the shelf. But today, there's been huge investment in just the past year or 2 years on both packing systems and storage systems. Controlled atmosphere storage, you're able to basically put an apple to sleep, and when you take it out, then almost have it fresh. And whether you're in March with an apple that's been picked in October, you can do that. So huge investments in those types of facilities right in the area that I represent, as people are trying to respond to more of a fresh market apple industry and being able to sell to people as fresh pretty much throughout the year. So amazing things happening, and I'm sure more to change as we go forward.
Don't think that hasn't gone unnoticed by the Friesen household, too. Right. We're scoping out apples a lot longer of a season than we ever used to be able to. All right, so let's talk a little bit about where the budget talks are right now here at the state capitol. The deadline to have a new budget in place is the end of March, March 31st. The new fiscal year begins April 1st. And, it's been quiet, but there's been a lot of optimism that not only will this year's budget be on time for that part of this discussion, but it might even be early.
Well, a number of things happened. One, in December, the legislature passed a bill that's kind of set the tax structure of the state going forward, changed some brackets around, and overall that raised more revenue because of doing some higher taxing on the upper end, people who make over $2 million. What that has done is there isn't a lot of haggling in this budget about how are we going to raise the revenue to do what we want to do. There was also, in last year's budget, a 2-year education and 2-year healthcare spending plan done last year. And so we're not haggling about how much money goes to education. We're haggling a little bit about how we spend it within that framework. The governor wants to spend $250 million on competitive grants for districts that perform well. And I think in a perfect world, I like that concept, competitive grants. But last year, we just took money away from districts, and the ones that got hit the worst were some of the poorer and a lot of the rural districts, ones that I represent. My feeling is that $250 million this year ought to be used to help those districts get replenished some of that money. If you put it in competitive grants, there's no way they can compete for that grant. They're going to lose out, kind of be hit in a double way. So that's one of the sticking points. We have changes to the retirement system been brought out. That's a sticking point. But generally, a lot of the funding, $132.5 billion budget, there's not a lot of difference of where the money goes. And one of the reasons is there isn't a lot of extra money to spend. As far as revenues coming in, I mentioned the change in the tax law last year, but also we just had a revenue forecasting conference, people from around the country, some economic experts talking about where's the economy headed. They're talking about a 2.2% growth or so anticipated in the coming year, maybe growing to 2.6 the following year. New York State is kind of following along that similar line. In our region, we've actually been doing a little bit better than the state as a whole and the nation as a whole. We'll see if that continues. There's no guarantees on any of this in forecasting. It's using predictors to try to say where we're going to be. But if we look at that highest estimate to lowest estimate of 5 different conferences and the governor being involved, there was only about a $300 million range, a couple $100 million above the governor or $134 million below the governor. That's really a pretty minuscule level when you look at $135 billion. So
billion, yeah, right.
Those issues, then putting that together, I think we are on a path. We're looking at one House budget bills coming out as early as the 12th of March next week. And we're looking at the possibilities, if there aren't huge sticking points, that clearly we should have a budget by April 1st, and maybe, if the stars line up, even a bit early.
We'll see if those stars line up, because I see some of those issues that, not that you glossed over them, but that you mentioned briefly, the pension reform, for example, the changes to the tier system for the public employees. Those could turn into some real sticky points here as we get closer to a conclusion of the budget, but we'll see. How about the business community? How are they feeling about what they're hearing about the direction the state's taking putting this budget together?
Well, it's interesting. Last night, the Manufacturers Association of Central New York had their meeting in Albany, or yesterday, and last night I was speaking to some of their leaders about where things are headed. And actually, last Friday in Wayne County, I had an opportunity, along with Jim Hoffman, our chairman of the Board of Supervisors, and Peg Churchill, who's our Industrial Development Agency director in Wayne County. We met with some of the local industry leaders, the people who are presidents and CEOs of the manufacturing operations in the county. Very interesting. They're concerned about the business environment in New York State, the regulations that are passed, the taxing structure. But in talking to them, their biggest concern about next year and the next 2, 3, 4 years out is their workforce. They're very concerned about having prepared people to take the positions that are going to be opening up, either through growth, which they're seeing some growth, or number 2, retirements. They have a number of people who've worked there 30 years.
The baby boomers are all starting to ease out of the work environment.
And a lot of the kids that are coming through the educational system right now don't first and foremost look at a manufacturer as the place to go. And what these gentlemen and ladies were telling me is there are some great opportunities with some people with some, I would say, mid-level skills, meaning they don't need an engineering degree to do them, but they need to know some math in science for applying and whatever. There are some great opportunities, and our youth and students, our schools need to be focused at, are we helping kids to see this as one of the opportunities? A 4-year college degree isn't for everybody, and number 2, it may not be for everybody right away. You might be a lot better off financially to start working for an entity that might help pay you when they see some of your possibilities that you might have going forward.
That seems like that's been an issue for the state, is to somehow coordinate the business community with the local colleges. The community colleges are a huge part of that, but the SUNY system and so forth, coordinate that so that the colleges are meeting the needs of the education needed for the potential employees in the workplace.
Well, one of the problems is that schools rank themselves on what percentage of their students they send on to higher education. So we have, if your school is sending 60% and my school is sending 80%, I'm doing a lot better than you are, that we're sending them on to higher education. And we even have some schools battling that 93%, and this one's 95%, so I'm doing better than you are. I think we need to change the numbers and perhaps say, if you're working to a job that you're going to be learning onto something else, those ought to be included in those numbers. Let's not compete in a crazy way. Let's compete in where the marketplace is driving. I think we ought to make those changes.
It would certainly be just as valid a situation. We're out of time. I want to thank Bob Oakes, as always, for spending time with us. Our next program, maybe we'll even have a state budget already in place. That would be early if that was the case. We thank Bob Oakes for joining us. We thank you folks, too, and we'll hope to see you soon for our next edition of Assembly Calendar.